And welcome to the Planet X podcast, episode number 3. Today, we're going to talk a little Star Wars. So, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike. And we are 4 days
4 days
away.
As of the time we are recording this, 4 days away.
The eve of the Force Awakening.
Yes. And we have the premiere going on out in California right now. It was being streamed live on StarWars.com, and it was I know I have Verizon Fios, and they were playing it live on TV, so I was watching that prior to coming on the air.
And now that it's premiered, that means I am going to shut off every piece of electronic something that could possibly spoil the movie for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty much gonna go dark pretty much after this, because I don't want to. I've seen enough. I don't want to go crazy and see too much more.
Yeah, somebody started talking to me about things about it the other day that they had heard or read, and I kind of gave them that look, like that look that somebody gives when you start. When somebody starts telling a white guy racist jokes and then he finds out that that dude's married to a black woman.
Yeah.
I kind of had that look of like, no, this is not, no.
Yeah. Don't do that. It's not okay.
This is not okay.
This is not okay. But, we've been, in the grand scheme of things, we've been pretty lucky because we don't really know life without Star Wars.
Right. Well, that's what I keep telling people. I'm like, this movie, I've said numerous times, I've been waiting 32 years for this movie. And people have said that, well, there's been other Star Wars movies. I'm like, I've been waiting 32 years for a sequel to Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. The prequels, as much shit as the prequels get, and, a good portion of that deservedly at this point.
Yeah, and I've never been one of those guys that is like too hip to be like, oh no, I liked all those movies at one point when I was enthused when the movies were coming out. I saw them, and when people asked me how Phantom Menace was, I'm like, it was great. I saw it a bunch of times this weekend.
Yeah, I saw it
day off of work when Phantom Menace came out.
I took a week off of work. I saw it 13 times.
But I'm not gonna pretend like in retrospect I didn't like cringe at the Boss Nass stuff and the Jar Jar Binks stuff and some of the lines and some of the things, and I was like, you just had that little bit of disappointment, but there was enough kind of cool stuff that kept it. It was like, the pod race was really cool, and then they start talking about midi-chlorians, and I'm like, no, that's
yeah,
that's not right. That
goes against everything we were taught.
And then there's some Darth Maul stuff, and you're like, okay, here we go. And then they start talking about, taxation and trade federation issue, and I'm like, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, and then something else cool would happen.
But at the time going in, it was like, shit, it's Star Wars. We hadn't seen Star Wars since 1983. For all intents and purposes.
Yeah, and I told people were like, oh, it wasn't that good. And I'm like, yes, it wasn't as good as one of the greatest movies ever made in the history of movies.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that because I'm a giant fan. I'm saying that because like the American Film Institute it's in their at least top 20. I think it was 14 or something like that. There were movies I got mad at that were like ranked higher than it. I'm like, what the hell? It actually made me watch Some Like It Hot, because I think on that initial American Film Institute list of top 100 movies, it went Star Wars was like 14 and Some Like It Hot was 13. I'm like, what the fuck is this bullshit? I've never even heard, and then I checked it out. I'm like, oh, this is a really good, funny movie. Never mind, So Star Wars kind of made me hate other movies. I'm like, oh, it couldn't be as good as Star Wars. I'm like, that's pretty good. Like the Oscars with Annie Hall.
Yeah.
Annie Hall won the Oscar beat Star Wars for the Oscar in 1977. And I watch Annie Hall and I'm like, this is a really good movie. I'm like, I don't think it's as good as Star Wars, but it is a really good movie. And people are like, oh, Annie Hall is a better movie than Star Wars. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't remember any of the kids in my school having Annie Hall lunchboxes.
Word.
And I don't know any adults now that go out and spend $50 on a used Annie Hall lunchbox.
Yeah.
Even though I probably would, because that would be kind of like...
That would be kind of cool. That would be kind of interesting to have. But
And the other thing, too, as much shit as you can give George Lucas about screwing up the franchise, but, with the prequels and the things that he did, he never slept with his stepdaughter.
True. That we're aware of.
But
I don't think he has a stepdaughter either.
No, he's got a bunch of adopted kids, but he didn't fuck any of those. So I'm gonna put, George Lucas, Woody Allen, who's hurt their credibility more. I think Woody Allen is beating George Lucas in that race.
Yeah, and we had the and even before the prequel trilogies had come out, we got our appetites wet for the prequel trilogy when the special editions got released.
Again, and it was another thing. I'm like, this is awesome. They put new stuff in it. And then we were like, I kind of miss the old ones.
and that's kind of sad for me, going forward. Like I still have my VHS copies. I do have technically the original theatrical cuts on DVD. But there's a whole generation of kids that haven't seen the original cuts. And that's a shame. And I always hear people going, oh, well, now that Disney has Star Wars, maybe we'll get those cuts released. And we can't because they're owned by Fox, which is a little bit of an issue.
But I wouldn't be surprised if Fox would release them anyway. It would make money. I mean, how many times have we gone to that well and we bought... I bought the trilogy on VHS.
37 copies of the trilogy.
I know, I have everything. I always say, I'm like, I'm even going to buy. I've had them in my hands before. The Laserdisc copies of it.
Yeah, and the Laserdisc copies. If you can get a copy of the Laserdiscs, those are the truest form of the movie.
Then you just got to get yourself a Laserdisc player.
Yeah,
but I've said that. When people ask me, they're like, why do you need all these different copies? Why don't you just have one? Or one of each version? Why do you need it in multiple different formats like that? I'm like, what if there's an apocalypse? And what if all the DVD players are destroyed? And I need something to watch the trilogy on.
VCR player,
I got to hold up for a second.
All right.
Oh, you're here. Oh, I heard something. I thought it was him.
Yeah, the beauty of live podcasting.
Yeah. He's up here with me. He was looking out the window, I guess. Are you all right? You still in that trouble? I'm sorry. Andrew had been in the shower, and I didn't know where Brent. I heard a noise, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't the dog eating something.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I'll fix this.
I figured that's why if I gave you the thing and we stopped talking,
I saw you. So, I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Oh, if there was an apocalypse and all the DVD players,
the apocalypse. And you get a crappy, you find the only electronics you have working is a VCR. You're going to want to be able to watch Star Wars.
Or a Laserdisc player, or I'll get it on reel-to-reel tape, reel-to-reel film, 8mm film or whatever, like they used to show you at school.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my look and listen Star Wars 45s still.
Yeah, I still have those. I have
in the record.
I have the radio dramatization.
Oh, you got me beat on that. I don't have the radio dramatization. I have the novelizations. I still got a bunch of action figures. I'll play it out for myself.
I've got, unfortunately, moving and having an evil dog, which you'll hear about occasionally on the show, I'm sure. lost a good chunk of my action figures, but as an adult, I have been gradually repurchasing what I had. But yeah, I just it might be the biggest movie ever.
Yeah, it's at least in that. People criticize the merchandising of it.
Oh, the merchandising is going crazy.
It just kind of fit into it. And I mean, an example, something else that would be similar would be Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
But Wizard of Oz actually came from other source material. Wizard of Oz was a book that then they, made into a film, and it became a thing. And the Wizard of Oz was a huge thing for kids for decades. Because like if you watch Christmas Story, which is supposed to take place in the 50s, and there's still Wizard of Oz stuff. There's people running around dressed up as the Wizard of Oz characters, because that was like the kids movie. You had Mickey Mouse stuff, Disney stuff, and you had the Wizard of Oz, and that was the extent of like children's entertainment, or at least quality children's entertainment. That goes. Otherwise you just got some like crap. And this went above this. I always held Star Wars on that same par as Wizard of Oz and Mary Poppins and the Disney live action things of the early, a lot of the Disney films, that it's quality enough that it's a family, that everybody can watch it. This is for kids. And there's people that'll still be like, oh, it's made for kids because it's toys. It's a toy commercial. It's, they sold out. And the thing is, if any movie, if Andy Hall could have sold lunchboxes, they would have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If, and this is pretty well known that, George Lucas, that was one of the smartest things he did, was the licensing rights.
Yeah. And I mean, the toy, you look at it, the toy license, it put the biggest toy company, the biggest action figure company at that point was Mego.
Yeah.
And they didn't get the Star Wars license. There was some kind of issue with it, and it went to Kenner instead. And it put Mego out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gave us, it gave us one of the greatest toy lines of all time, a toy line that to this day is still going. It also, gave us that where prior to that, all the action figures were of a larger size. So we had, now we had these, 3.25-inch figures that you could put into vehicles, and you can actually do stuff with.
Yeah.
And it is hands down, it is my favorite toy line of all time. And that's even above and beyond me being the Star Wars fan that I am. We grew up with a bunch of great toy lines, from, Star Wars and G.I. Joe and Masters of the Universe and the Transformers, where our childhood was, not for nothing, our childhood was fucking phenomenal.
It was the golden age of toys, and toys with TV shows and movies. It was,
yeah.
And that Star Wars kind of proliferated through it all. We had Star Wars birthday cakes. We had Star Wars t-shirts.
Star Wars cookies.
Yeah.
Star Wars t-shirts, lunchboxes.
There was all that stuff. And, I can remember being 6-7 years old when Jedi came out. And when Darth Vader dies, I was upset because that meant there weren't going to be any more Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And I can remember at one point there was like an interview with George Lucas someplace in the late 80s. And he said, or the mid 80s, 86, 87. And he said, I'm not going to make any more Star Wars movies. And I can remember where I was standing to this day when my father told me that, when he read that news article. And I will still think of it as I was in the garage at my parents' house, and if I go there now, when I walk through that part of the garage, sometimes I remember that.
Yeah,
and that George.
It's like walking through. It's like walking through that cold spot in the house.
Yes.
Somebody died there, basically.
And the toy line, they kind of they put out some of the cartoons. They kind of tried to reinvent the toy line a couple different times. There was the I remember you're reading in a magazine about they had invented a new villain just for the toy lines, that some evil cloner left over from the Clone Wars was going to come out of hiding now that the Empire had fell. And they were going to have these new characters for the Star Wars characters to fight. And they would incorporate them into the comic book, and they would carry them over into a toy line, and it wouldn't be part of the films. It would be all new stuff. And then they just decided to pull the plug instead.
Yeah.
And they undid the toy line, and you had 6 years or so, 7 years of nothing. Yeah. And then the novels started coming out.
Then the novels started coming out, and that was kind of the resurgence of Star Wars. And you and I had gone, and this was kind of in the early days. I don't want to say the early days of conventions, because Star Trek conventions had been going on for a while, but there was a very small Star Wars convention by our grandparents' house one year, and the two of us went to it, and it was tiny. It was half a ballroom in a hotel, if that. But I think if we walked in there at that point in time, if we walked in there with $300 in our pockets, we could have owned everything Star Wars.
Yeah, pretty much. There was I remember specifically, and I remember not having much cash. Because I don't even know. I'm not even sure if we drove to that. We might have got dropped off.
Your father took us. Your father took us. So we weren't driving yet. So we were, we were early high school, maybe freshman, maybe. Yeah,
so it's early
8th grade.
And I remember buying the Burger King Empire Strikes Back glasses.
Yes.
That I had when I was a kid that had all gotten destroyed through the years. And, I replaced those, and I was like, oh, this is important. And looking at other things there, and I'm like, oh, I wish I had $30 to buy this and this. It was just a little bit extra cash, like adult money. It would have went a long way then.
Yeah. Now in hindsight, we look at the stuff we bought and we're like, all right, you bought those Star Wars glasses, I think, for like $10 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think you can maybe get one glass for $10 if you're lucky.
I think I got for $15, I got the Empire Strikes Back ones, and for $10, I got the Return of the Jedi ones.
Yeah.
It was that type of day. And I actually had recently, I want to say it was last summer, there was a garage sale by my house, like within walking distance. I walked up to this cul-de-sac right across the street from my house, walked down the end of the cul-de-sac. Somebody was having a garage sale, and they had some of that glassware. And I saw like one of those old McDonald's glasses with like Grimace on it. And I'm like, oh, that might be fun to have. And when I got there and I saw they had some of the Star Wars glasses, they weren't in great shape. Some of them were. One of them might have had a crack in it, but it was all 4 Empire Strikes Back glasses.
Yeah.
I'm like, and it was one of those stupid moments of like, like, all right, be cool, dude. Don't blow it.
Yeah, don't blow it, because you're gonna, they're gonna.
And I was like, what do you want for the glasses? And they're like 50 cents a piece. I'm like,
okay.
And I'm like, I'm not even like gonna sell these. I'm just gonna I just have them in case my other ones break.
Yeah. But so we had that lull for a bunch of years where there wasn't. I think the Marvel comic was still going on for a little bit, but was kind of wrapping up. And then we didn't have any Star Wars. And then we had the Timothy Zahn books, the Thrawn trilogy that came out, and that really kind of sparked Star Wars again.
Yeah. I was reading those my senior year in high school, my freshman year in college. And I think that's also when Star Wars Insider Magazine started.
Yeah.
Because they started licensing Star Wars things again. And you had Star Wars Insider Magazine, the comic license, the Marvel Star Wars comic had been dead for a few years. And they put the license over to DC, and DC started creating some things.
Or it was Dark Horse.
Oh yeah, not Dark Horse, not DC. That's what I meant. I pictured the Dark Horse logo.
I know what you meant.
And DC came out of my mouth. But you had those different licenses, and I can remember somebody describing the Thawne trilogy books as you're reading them, you can hear the John Williams music in your head.
Absolutely.
Because it reinvigorated all of it, and people started talking about it, and people started talking about the new characters and these other things, and it went all over the place. It was around, and there were people there whose job it was for Lucasfilm just to manage continuity between the different books and things.
Yeah,
that they created that universe, that book universe, and it was a lot of fun. And then the rumors started that maybe they're looking at doing something else, and then the special edition talk, and then it all just started snowballing. That and that was, it was like hearing your favorite band was getting back together.
Yeah, absolutely. And and around that same time is when they started releasing new figures as well for the toy line, which that first run of the toy line was ridiculously stupid looking.
The super buff guys that couldn't fit in the
super buff guys, the Princess Leia that looked like a gorilla, the lightsabers that were taller than the figures. That first, like, I guess I don't want to say run, but like the first wave of figures were pretty awful.
But it was like, hey, I got Star Wars figures again. You know, and it was, and like, look how detailed they are. Look how buff Luke is for some reason. But
and since that time, we've been getting new figures, every couple months, basically.
I was discussing the names of characters, the minuscule characters from the films, and I was talking to with watching it with kids now, and they're like, "Who's that guy? What's that guy's name? Who's that guy?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I'm like, but now all these guys had a figure, and they all have a name, and somebody
wrote a real name. It's not like when we were kids, when it was Hammerhead and Walrus Man. It was now it's Ponda Baba and they all have actual character names now.
And actually, a lot of them wound up getting these elaborate backstories between the comics and the different. They'd put out these like collection of short stories novels. And it would kind of explain who different guys were. And you're like, all right, this is a lot of fun, but it got hard to keep up with some of it. And the people that were super into the novels, they start talking about things, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, you lost me, man. I'm like, I read a couple. I read these books, and I'll be honest, some of the books I was disappointed. Some of the books I'm like, this is great, and other ones I was like, you struggled to get through it, and some of the concepts in it were dodgy.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Some of the books were brilliant, and some of the books were just, some of the books, it was like somebody wrote the book just to get a paycheck, basically.
Yeah.
The Courtship of Princess Leia comes to mind.
As mind as well. That's the one that might have been the one that sunk it for me. The Courtship of Princess Leia.
And that was early on. That was an early on novel.
Might have been one of the ones that when I picked that up, I was like, all right, and I backpedaled a little bit because I was getting them all, and then I read the Courtship of Princess Leia, and I was like, okay, I think we're gonna.
I think I got like 2 or 3 chapters in, and I'm like, I can't do this one.
I powered through it, and it was not worth it. It was. No. I think the only thing they introduced some concepts in the Courtship of Princess Leia that were even like used in the Clone Wars. I think that's where they introduced the planet where Ventress came from. Okay. In Clone Wars, she was those characters were introduced in the Courtship of Princess Leia, if I'm right. But then that was going to be it.
I'm not going to read it and find out.
Yeah. And that was also like there were those Jedi witches there, and there was like that's where Rancors lived. Like they were witches that rode Rancors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. But it was
so
like,
I mean,
the way I always looked at it, some of those novels, I'm like, I am in the world of how this guy played with his Star Wars figures.
Yeah.
That somebody rode the Rancor, and I'm like, all right, I could kind of see that, and I was, it made kind of sense to a point, but at that point, I'm like, it was glorified fan fiction.
Yeah,
I guess there were some that were really good, and I'm not, not to knock fan fiction. I've read some, and I've seen some fan fiction things put together that are really solid. I'm like, oh, that's better than some sequels you see.
Yeah,
and I think that
other times it's not.
Fast forwarding up to this movie that we're waiting for to come out this week. One of the good things about it is it's fan fiction. It's a story that's done by somebody who loves the product and wants it to be great again, and has had this idea in his head for 30 years, has been cultivating this idea for 30 years.
Yeah. And that was why I was happy to hear that, JJ got his hands on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, if anybody was going to do it justice, it was going to be JJ Abrams. And I know there were a lot of people that weren't happy with his Star Trek movies. I loved his.
Yeah, they're called Star Trek fans.
Yeah,
the big time Trekkies. I mean, I've asked them joking around sometimes at some of the conventions that we've been at, and the reactions I get are classic. But what's funny is as I've been watching the original Star Trek lately. I've been watching it on Netflix, where they remastered all those episodes and kind of, they got rid of the model planets and spaceships and computer generated. I mean, it looks good. I can't, they did a better job with their special editions. I think there's not really anything super heavy handed in it. It definitely added to it. But as I'm watching this, and like the more memorable Star Trek series, they're like, Star Trek isn't about fighting and action. But then like all the ones that I remember are,
Kirk
the fights at
Gorn.
Kirk fighting the Gorn, Kirk fighting Spock, Kirk fighting, I'm like, it is all the ones that everybody ever talks about are fighting. Every other one, it's him. It's Kirk and Spock outsmarting a supercomputer or a super powerful being. It's the other one's kind of blended in. I'm being a little, I'm busting balls a little bit, but because I'm not one of the. Again, that's another Star Wars thing. I was never one of those Star Wars guys, Star Wars fans that hated Star Trek.
Yeah, I always enjoyed Star Trek. I mean, I was always more of a Star Wars fan than Star Trek. But if Star Trek is on, I'm going to watch it. I was a big fan of Next Generation.
Oh, me too. I loved it, and it was and. I think what happened because of Star Wars was anything, space, robots, science fiction. And, a hardcore science fiction fan will tell you Star Wars isn't true science fiction. It's fantasy. But it opened that door for me into science fiction.
Yeah.
And into fantasy, because I think there was a combination of the two, that love of a space adventure and that love of a fantasy magical adventure. So things, even though Star Wars kind of borrows from things like Lord of the Rings, then I'm like, all right, I got into the Lord of the Rings cartoons, and I got into things like Dragon Slayer and Conan, and
it kind of opened your eyes to other things.
It's a gateway movie.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
It gets it, it opens that door, and that's why I kind of I try not to get defensive about it, but when things like that Saturday Night Live skit this weekend, where they're goofing on they're doing the stereotypical nerdy Star Wars fan, but that is kind of the toy collector, and the jokes were funny, but it's like, I don't know, and it might have been because of the prequels and guys lining up in costume for a day or a week for the movie to come out, that turned because the Star Wars fan was always a little bit more hip and loose, and it's like, oh yeah, man, I love this, but I'm not, I didn't learn how to speak Wookiee like the way a Star Trek fan, would get goofed on for learning how to speak Klingon or writing a Klingon language. And then it was almost like the fandom did a disservice to itself.
Yeah, in a way, the fandom did kind of kick itself in the ass a little bit. And it
became like, and then it started. People were like, "Oh, Star Wars fans," and it's like, well, a lot of people, everybody who doesn't like Star Wars, and then the people who kind of got a chip on their shoulders, like, I'm not a guy that doesn't like Star Wars. Like that made them cool to be like, yeah, here's a good movie that everybody likes, but I'm going to be the hip dude that doesn't. I'm going to,
and like that's that's one of the things. Like I run into every once in a blue moon, I run into somebody that has never seen Star Wars before, or claims to have never seen Star Wars, and I don't know how that is physically or emotionally possible.
I hate to have I'm like, oh, that's like a form of child abuse. It's
yeah. I did watch, and this is a funny thing. I saw this video on YouTube. Somebody posted, one of the Star Wars Facebook pages I'm on, posted this video, and it did remind me why I don't want to have children of my own, but it was cute. It was a father sitting his daughter down to watch episode 4.
Oh,
I got about a minute and a half in and I turned it off. It was adorable, but it was like every time something was happening. Like the father was like geeking out because he's like, I'm sitting here watching Star Wars with my kid, but she kept asking questions. And me, I would have just turned and been like, shut up and watch the damn movie. But
which is what
where's my duct tape?
with showing the kids the movie, I'm like, just watch and you'll see what happens.
Yeah. But
is that a good guy or a bad guy? I'm like, keep watching.
Keep watching. You'll find out.
And that's if you want to get into that realm of the good guy and the bad guy. That was one of those movies that blurred the line a little bit on what somebody looks like, not necessarily meaning if they're the good guy or the bad guy. In that Star Wars world, you had some guys that were monsters on the good guy's side, like Chewbacca and Admiral Akbar, and there might have been one other alien that was a good.
Yeah,
they didn't have as many aliens as maybe they should have in that.
And even one of, until the special editions came out, at least in the original, in A New Hope, even one of your main characters wasn't really, at least for most of the movie, wasn't really a great guy. He was just kind of out for himself.
Yeah.
And that was Han Solo.
Yeah.
And then, George went and decided to change the character by having somebody else shoot first. And, he doesn't understand that, like, because I saw him in an interview recently talking about it, where he said, kind of going back on his thing and saying, Han never shot first. It's like, no, Han shot first. I was there. I saw it. Han didn't even shoot first. Han shot.
Yeah. There was, he did. The guy had a gun pulled on him. He didn't shoot him in cold blood, but it was a little bit of a dastardly thing to do. But he was in that like criminal element. And I think the story there isn't that, oh, look what he did. It's what he did later, that he did come back, that he did turn over a new leaf and become.
And that's always my argument when I talk to people about that, and people, it doesn't, that scene being changed doesn't change anything. To me, it completely changes the character.
Yeah.
Where he went from, he had a gun pulled on him, but he shot the guy. And by the end of the movie, he's come to have friends and be part of part of this group, where prior to that he didn't have that.
And with all this, and they changed that, and they made a big stink about it. And then Spielberg, when he took the guns out of E.T., I'm really surprised that they never tried to change the scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indiana Jones shoots the swordsman
which was one of the greatest improvised scenes in movie history.
Yeah, it's a great scene, just period. It's a fantastic reaction, and it was it was a hysterical scene. And again, he just kind of shot that dude. The dude had a sword and he had a gun and he shot him.
Yeah.
But, if you bring it back to the Han Solo Greedo thing, Greedo had a gun on him. Greedo wasn't going to, Greedo was shaking him down, and was going to. Yeah. And it was, it was a bit of a scumbag thing to do, but he was a bit of a scumbag.
Yeah, it was, it's either me or him, it's either him or me, and that's.
Yeah, and I mean, even when they get to the Death Star, the only reason he bothers to help is that he finds out that there's a pretty girl who's rich.
Yeah.
That, he can get a payday for helping her. So he's not a great guy until that. He's a smug prick who doesn't necessarily do the right thing until the very end.
And when he does the right, except for at the end, when he does the right thing, it's not because he wants to, it's because he's going to get paid.
Well, he got paid and split. And then came back and saved Luke anyway. That was the...
that's what I'm saying. Up until that point.
Yeah, he takes his money and runs, and you're like, oh, all right. And then at the very end, that's what makes it a great ending in that initial run of it, because the dastardly guy that was kind of helping you hightailed it, and then he changed his mind and came back and helped you, which is pretty obvious that that's what was going to happen. But as a little kid, the first time you see it, or as anybody the first time you see it, it's a great scene.
Yeah.
Because it builds and it builds and it builds, and then Han Solo swoops in and saves him, and the Death Star blows up, and you're like, that's the best ending to a movie I ever saw in my whole fucking life.
To this day.
Yeah, catch my breath for a second. I'm fucking...
So, I mean,
I'm having a theoretical argument with nobody.
you are, but yeah, we got the special editions, and then we had we had this great, I almost want to say a renaissance of Star Wars.
You know what I was thinking about? Going back to the because right now they are marketing the fuck out of everything is Star Wars. There's Star Wars macaroni and cheese. There's Star Wars.
I saw a fucking Fiat commercial. It's like there's a black Fiat and a white Fiat, and it's like, Star Wars related.
There's that whole,
I don't know.
There's a Dodge one with the black, I don't know if it's I don't know what kind of sport, it's some kind of Dodge sports car coming down, and then there's a bunch of Chargers and Challengers and Jeeps that are all white that look like the Stormtrooper is rolling in behind them, pulling up to a movie theater with the Imperial March playing. But with all that marketing, one of the things I was thinking about, because one of the breakfast cereals has got a tie-in now, or a series of breakfast cereals, and Subway's got it. But it made me think of C-3POs.
Yes. Yes, the breakfast cereal from when we were kids. And I mean, that was the thing. Like, Star Wars got merchandise. You think the merchandising now is crazy. Back then, merchandising, because that was all new. Nobody had done anything like that before. But we had the C-3POs, the cereal. We had the Pepperidge Farm cookies, which were fantastic. And I still see boxes of them on eBay, and I'm just like, I'm going to buy them and eat them, but they're like 35-year-old cookies.
Yeah, that could be a mistake. I would avoid the 35-year-old cookies.
I would probably avoid the 35-year-old cookies, but I remember them being really tasty.
Yeah,
it's tough. So that's why I haven't bought them.
Well, that's why with some of the marketing being in different things, I'm like, I wish there was the Burger King glasses again for these.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they're doing it through Subway, and it's all like plastic crap. And I mean, and a lot of the stuff we had was plastic crap. One of the things I liked about C-3PO, the C-3POs, was the box always had like a punch-out mask in it. You got like a C-3PO mask or something. There's just a piece of cardboard. You put a string on and you wore a stupid mask. But you're like, oh, I got a mask with my cereal.
It's fantastic. I picked up Honey Nut Cheerios like a couple weeks ago because it was Star Wars tied in. And I love me some Honey Nut Cheerios, but it was like the thing inside was, it's like they're advertising these droids, and I open it up and it's a mouse droid. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. What do you do with it? And you look in it, and it's kind of like a Viewmaster, but it doesn't do anything. It's a Viewmaster that shows you, it's a mouse droid Viewmaster that shows you a picture of a mouse droid. I'm like, this is the most disappointing toy ever.
Oh, that's great.
And I think the cat kicked it under the couch. So
there you go. Yeah, I mean, they're
under the couch, and I'll find a mouse droid. And I'll be like, "Oh, this is cool!" And I'll hold it up to Lego. Fuck, it's just a picture of a mouse droid.
Yeah, there was a ton of stuff that I held on to. There was a ton of stuff I bought in the '90s when they re-released new versions of things. One of the things that on my mom's side of the family, not our common uncle, but I have my mom's brother Tom had from 1977. He bought the remote control R2D2.
Nice.
That came out. It was like 12 inches, 16 inches high.
Yeah, it wasn't very big.
And it just kind of rolled back and forth, and the head turned around, and it made the noises. It beeped and stuff. And he had it back then. I remember he used to always have it in his room, and he had it up on a top shelf, so I never got at it. And he would pull it down occasionally, and I'd get to mess with it. And he took it with him when he moved. And he always had it, and he still has it in his house. It's up on a shelf behind the bar. And nice. In his basement. And out of all that, he held on to a bunch of those things, because when he was in that age of his 20s and had money and was single, he bought things like the remote control R2D2 and an Odyssey game console, and and he still has all that stuff, and he took care of it. He never upgraded to a Nintendo or anything. Well, I mean, he might have upgraded to a regular Nintendo at one point, but he still has an Odyssey that he can plug in and work.
Yeah.
And that R2D2 is still sitting there. And I'm like, one day it will be mine. One day. I've been eyeing up that R2D2 for 40 years.
Yeah. And I was, as we had talked about earlier, when the new line of figures had come out, which I think was like 95-ish, 96-ish, kind of around the time that the special editions were coming out, I got into that where I was buying figures, and then I was just buying everything.
Oh, yeah.
So I have boxes upon boxes upon boxes in storage of just Star Wars merchandise that pretty much ain't worth anything. I mean, I was never buying it to send a kid to college or retire on.
Yeah, you're buying it because it became something to collect. It was something you wanted. Yeah.
And it was, it was something that I cared about. And I mean, I'd pretty much been, I've loved it pretty much since that. My earliest memories are Star Wars. But occasionally I'll go through the boxes and I'll be like, why the fuck did I buy this?
I have done that.
Why did I buy it? Why did I keep it? Like when Phantom Menace came out, like I went out for friends for my birthday and they bought like Phantom Menace party hats, just the stupid cone party hats. I've still got all the stupid cone party hats. What the fuck am I going to do with them?
I had, a lot of those toys that I bought in the 90s, whether collecting them or whether holding on to them. And recently, as I've been going through boxes that I had just moved into my house and never really opened from when I took them to from my parents' house. And I opened this stuff up and I'm like, I have these Star Wars toys that aren't worth anything that are still in the boxes. I've been giving them to my nephew. Because it's I'd rather a kid play with it than just have these boxes of kind of worthless toys, or a couple about $4 or $5. Maybe they're worth what I paid for them, but it's not some giant collectible that's worth hundreds of dollars. Because everybody did the same thing.
Everybody did the same thing. Everybody collected them.
So right now it means more to me that that somebody plays with them, that a kid enjoys them, than to just have them boxed up somewhere.
Yeah. And I have a 5-month-old nephew that someday will get my Star Wars toys. when I sit down and watch the. By the point I get to sit down and watch Star Wars with him, there's probably going to be like 30 Star Wars movies.
Yeah, because now they're just going to crank them out, and people are like, "Oh, we're going to get tired of Star Wars."
One a year. And
I'm like, I'm never going to get tired of Star Wars movies. When the prequels came out, and somebody asked me, like, "Oh, they're not as good, right?" And I'm like, "You could make a movie, a 90-minute movie, 2-hour-long movie about Yoda going to do his laundry, and if there was one lightsaber fight in it, I would love it. I would, that movie, I'd be like, okay, this is
and we might be getting that movie. We might get in the Yoda doing his laundry movie.
Yoda doing his yeah. And they'll have it.
Yoda's day off. Yoda's day off,
Yes. And when there's a special edition of it, I'll buy the special edition of Yoda's Day Off.
Yep.
And people will be like, is it any good? Oh, yeah, it's all right. There's a lot of movies that aren't Star Wars, and this one is.
Yeah. That's all, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So we had the resurgence of the novels, we had the figures, we had the movies, the comics got big again, and Dark Horse did a fantastic job with the comics.
Yes, they did. There was a lot of fun things that they did with those comics. Interesting stories, funny stuff, delving into different characters, doing sequels to some of the novels.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that was we had a ton of video games that came out. Some were really, really good. A lot of them were not.
I agree with you there. The earliest one I remember is the Atari Star Wars game.
The vector graphics, the arcade game.
I'm thinking of is the Empire Strikes Back Atari game.
Yes. Okay.
There was the vector graphics one that I remembered playing in arcades,
which is one of my favorite video games of all time. I still have I have a copy that I can play on my GameCube. And when we're done here, I may hook that up and go play.
I would do the same thing. But I can remember playing at my neighbor's house the Empire Strikes Back one where you flew a snowspeeder and you had to shoot the AT-ATs. You're shooting at the AT-AT walkers. And then you would have to recharge your ship and you would have to land it. And it was harder than landing the ship in what was that old Nintendo game? That Top Gun Nintendo game?
Oh, the Top Gun Nintendo game was ridiculously hard to land.
Up, down, down, Jesus Christ. And it was super hard to land as a little kid. And I was like, oh, you got to slow down. You got to bring the thing in. And you had to, it's like, oh, this blows. One of the first great Star Wars home games was the Super Nintendo ones.
Yeah. Yeah, the Super Nintendo Star Wars games were phenomenal.
They did the series of them. And I actually just, with the special edition PlayStation 4 Star Wars Battlefront set that I got, it came with 4 downloadable games, and one of them was Super Star Wars.
Oh, wow.
So I played a little bit of Super Star Wars, and I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. And it's, it's a game that's 20-something years old now. But at the time, there had been nothing like it in that realm of Star Wars games. You had a couple different things where you flew around and did stuff like that. But this was, I'm playing a Star Wars. I'm swinging a lightsaber. I'm shooting. I'm flying ships. And then they consistently pumped out Star Wars games. Some good, some bad.
And I really will go on record saying that more often than not, they were kind of poor. But occasionally you find a gem in there. And more recently, they've been better. They've been a lot better.
There was one I had that was essentially, it was just like Star Wars Twisted Metal, where you went around in different vehicles just trying to blow.
What the hell was that called? I forget what that was called. But one of the worst Star Wars games that I can remember playing, and I own a copy. I can fire my PlayStation up and play it right now. Is the Star Wars Masters of Terra Kasai or whatever? It was back when Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter were big. They decided that they had to make a Star Wars
fighting game. Yes.
And it was atrocious.
And it was like guys with lightsabers, and then guys just had a gun, and it was like this is just a fighting game.
Yeah, that one was pretty bad. Any of the movie adaptions were pretty awful. At least the prequel movie adaptions were pretty awful.
There was one of these other downloadable games I got was there's a pod racer game. There was a Jedi Knights fighter game, and there might have been one more, and I can't necessarily remember what it was.
I know there was Star Wars Pod Racer for the N64, which was it's your typical racing game. It was it wasn't quite Mario Kart, but it was it was Need for Speed with pod racers. A lot of the better games that I had played were on the PC actually. With the X-Wing TIE Fighter series was
I forgot about those. Yeah.
Great flight simulator game. The Rebel Assault and the Dark Forces games were fantastic. They were back when the first person shooters were, I don't want to say they were easy, but they weren't like ridiculous Call of Duty hard.
Right. Now, like one of the games that I played because it was close to a Star Wars game was Wing Commander.
Mm-hmm.
And that original Wing Commander that literally had Mark Hamill in it.
Yeah, I was going to say Mark Hamill was in it.
So you're like, all right, this is Mark Hamill flying a spaceship. This is a Star Wars game. I just found a list of Star Wars video games, and that original, there was a Star Wars game that was out from 83 to 88 for the Atari systems, Commodore, ColecoVision. Oh, geez, some of these, I don't even know what these are. Some DOS games and whatever. There was a Famicom game that came out in 87 that I had seen on Angry Video Game Nerd or one of their, or Mike and James, one of those James Ralph Cinemassacre shows. They reviewed it, and it looked cool, but apparently the gameplay on it sucked. And then that Super Star Wars was 1992.
Yeah, which was about the time of about the time of the resurgence of Star Wars.
Yeah, and then I guess they pumped those out about one a year.
Yeah,
because now Super Empire Strikes Back was 83, and then probably Super Return of the Jedi was 94. Yeah, 92, 93, 94. They had one a year, and I remember with like huge anticipation waiting for those games.
Now I need to go out and get a Super Nintendo and get those 3 games.
Yeah. Or you can spend $400 and something on a PlayStation and play a game that it. Actually, I have the Super Nintendo somewhere. I have it. I can go down and I have all 3 games in my basement somewhere.
We should find that, and we should have a game night.
Actually, I'm making it sound like I didn't just dig it up recently. It's in my dining room. I can go put my hands on it right now.
Of course, it is.
I dug it up the other day. I'm lying. But there was a ton of those games that they put out, and I never had a Commodore, and I think there was something.
I had a Commodore. I love that. I if I could get my hands on a Commodore 64 today, I would be happy. Because some of my earliest gaming was on a Commodore 64 because I was never allowed to have an Atari. So my parents figured I would just play video games. I needed a computer. So they got me a computer. That all I did was play fucking video games on.
Yes. You couldn't really do much else with the Commodore. You could write a paper on it, I think. It was just a glorified typewriter that you could play video games on. And it had a calculator in it. It was
I'd play the shit out of that Commodore 64 right now, though, if I had one.
There was a series of commercials that somebody had put up on a Facebook page for Prime computers. And this was very early 80s. And Tom Baker from Doctor Who and his wife, who played his companion Romana at the time, were in these commercials, and they're talking about these prime computers and the, and how sophisticated and futuristic they were, and all these things, and they're like, this is a computer that has less processing power than your phone. And
which is true.
Yes.
But another one of my favorite Star Wars game series has been the Lego games.
Yes.
The Star Wars Lego games, any of the Lego games are phenomenal, but the Star Wars Lego games are so much fun.
That whole Lego game empire, for something that just sat on paper, it sounds dumb.
It does sound dumb, but it's one of the greatest video game franchises ever.
Yeah. And it's smart the way they do it. There's some.
I have Lego games about movie franchises I don't care about. I have Harry Potter.
Well, that's something that we've been dwelling on the games, but and I started talking about how Star Wars made me watch other movies that had things to do with space, and you started to get those Star Wars ripoffs. Like the Star Trek film came out because Star Wars did so well. And then you got things like Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. And then there were different movies that borrowed a lot of Star Wars element, things like Krull and things, there were, he got into the Roger Corman stuff that was just pure out and out Star Wars ripoff.
Yeah.
But I tell people all the time, like, the greatest Star Wars ripoff franchise of all time is Harry Potter. Because
I had a conversation with my friend Sally about that literally like 24 hours ago.
And I tell people all the time, Harry Potter is an orphan who lives with his uncle, and life isn't great for him there. And then one day he finds out from an old wizard that he has inherited this great power from his father. His father, who was struck down by this Dark Lord. And if that Dark Lord finds out that he exists, he'll be sure to destroy him.
Yep.
And it's not, everybody's like, well, Voldemort isn't going to be Luke Skywalker's father. And I'm like, yeah, but they did it as close as they could. The fact that, when they did end it, and it's like, all right, Snape wasn't Harry Potter's father, but he wanted to be. It was as close as you were going to get it. She just did Star Wars in an English boarding school.
Pretty much.
And I think those are good movies, and I think they're done well. But
I don't hate the Harry Potter movies. I'm not a diehard fan, and if you could, you would ask me questions about them, I couldn't tell you. If I listened to the soundtrack, I wouldn't be able to see the scene in my head like I can with Star Wars, which is scary. But
and again, it came a little later for us. If you were a kid who those movies came out when you're 7 or 8 years old, and grew up with the franchise, you're going to live with it. It's funny. I've been talking with some people who are in their 20s who have always had 6 Star Wars movies and not 3.
Yeah.
And things are different for them, and they perceive stuff a little different. And, they don't quite get where we are with, we've been waiting for this for so long that, they haven't quite been waiting the same, their wait has been a little different. Yeah. And their attitude is a little different. And, I don't begrudge anybody for liking things in the prequel, or in the special editions, and growing up with Han Solo shooting first and things like that. There's a song. I'm not going to remember who did it. I might have it here. Maybe I can find it quick. But it was called "How Come
Why Dad So Mad?"
Yeah, why does Dad get so mad? And I forget exactly the name of the band that did it. But I heard it on satellite radio one time, and I had to pull the car over because I was laughing so much.
I can say that why is Dad so mad is on my iPod. I don't have it handy though.
I think it might be on mine too. That's I'm double checking right now. I have my iTunes opened on my iPad.
But I do want to mention, kind of not to go back to what we were just talking about, but as far as games go, there was one game franchise that both made me very happy and disappointed me completely, and that was the Force Unleashed franchise. Because that Force Unleashed, the first Force Unleashed game was one of the most amazing Star Wars games I've ever played. The second Force Unleashed game, not so much. I got that for Christmas. My wife had gone away, had gone to go visit some friends. I came home, got some beer, figured I'm going to play this game all weekend. I beat the game in 4 hours. And the game ended, and I kept waiting for something else to happen. And then the credits rolled, and I went,
"Where's part two?"
Fuck. So play Force Unleashed. Don't play Force Unleashed 2.
Now, with this next series of Star Wars movies coming out, one of the things I was thinking about that's kind of come with each set of Star Wars trilogies is we've gotten a Weird Al song per trilogy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what the relationship is right now with Weird Al and Disney. And I know with the prequels, he got to see Phantom Menace in advance. And he wrote that song, so it kind of came out along the same time. So it was ready for when the film was out and about. So it'll be interesting, and I'm sure he's kind of in the back of his head keeping it on deck, because I don't know if you've ever been to a Weird Al show.
I have not. He's on my bucket list.
He ends every show with the Star Wars songs with Yoda and the Saga Begins. He starts with the Saga Begins, and then he goes into Yoda, and it's become he's parodying himself now, because when they started doing it, they all came out in Jedi robes and and Sith type of things. The whole band would come out dressed that way. And then they started getting the guys who dress up as stormtroopers to come out, and they'd have a Darth Vader, and they'd have a series of stormtroopers out on stage to do the bit. What he did the last time I saw him was he marched all these guys up there, and he had all the things, and then he just went into some other Weird Al songs. And the stormtroopers just stood up there and looked confused until he got into the Star Wars songs, and then they picked up their choreography. But that's another part of the phenom that you've had songs.
Yeah.
And a lot of different songs mention there's that Queen song where it says I don't like Star Wars. Peter Pan.
Oh, you're throwing me in front of the bus.
Bicycle, yeah. Bicycle races.
Yes.
I had to kind of half sing the song to myself for a little bit, but that was there's that picture that shows up on the internet all the time. Freddie Mercury sat on the shoulders of a guy in a full Darth Vader costume and sang the song.
Yeah.
So it proliferated into different things. You had the Muppets episode with Star Wars.
The Muppets episode is one of my favorite episodes of the Muppet Show.
It's my all-time favorite episode. C-3PO and R2-D2 used to show up on Sesame Street.
We had, Star Wars gave us one of the greatest holiday specials ever.
I was going to try and I honestly, I wasn't going to bring it up. My whole plan was to mention the Star Wars holiday special in this whole talk about Star Wars. I feel like we beat it to death.
But, we have to. Sometimes we have to talk about the bad, and that was us talking about the bad.
We talked about other bad. It's not all.
I know.
But yeah, that happened.
It doesn't get much better. But yeah, it happened. I watch it every year. you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, this this is a big week. It's a week we've been waiting for a really long time. I'm almost kind of like numb to the fact that it's here. As bombarded as we've been in the past month or so with TV spots and commercials and shit, it kind of still hasn't registered with me that in 4 days we have new Star Wars.
Yeah, it is kind of weird that it's here now, that I've been waiting so long. That now I don't know what to do.
I guess that's how all the Superman Batman people are going to feel next summer. Sorry, yeah. I had to go there.
Yeah,
I had to go there. But anyway,
I watched one of the fun things that I did right before we actually did this show, and I DVR'd it because I just wanted to kind of see the enders that they did for it. Wonderful World of Disney this Sunday with Mary Poppins, and Dick Van Dyke did some little in-between stuff, coming in out of commercials or going into commercials. And he really didn't do much. I think he did 3 segments, in the course of a 3-hour movie. But it was still kind of fun. Dick Van Dyke, he's 90. He's still enthusiastic about all this stuff. So it's kind of cool to see him. But in the opening to Wonderful World of Disney, when they're showing all the classic Disney things and the Disney films, they're showing the Marvel movies. They're showing Star Wars. It's like they're showing the Pixar stuff. Like, oh yeah, this is all in that same, it's all under that same hood now.
Yeah.
And then there's that Star Wars theme park that we keep hearing about. That's on the books now.
Disney is for all intents and purposes for the next couple of years, Disney Studios in Orlando, and I think a good chunk of the park in California is getting redone and is going to be a Star Wars section. We've had in Orlando, we've had Star Tours, which got rebooted a couple years ago. So, every time you ride it, or supposedly every time you ride it, it should hopefully be a different experience. I rode it a couple times in a row and kind of got the same scenario. But I mean, it's just kind of luck of the draw.
I received a report over the weekend from a friend of mine who was just in Disney with his kid that Star Tours now has incorporated scenes from the new battle, the one of the new X-Wing battles.
Okay.
From the new film, that they fly into new movie stuff.
See, that's a little disappointing for me that they are doing that now with the movie having not been released yet.
When he started talking to me about it, I'm like, I don't want to hear too much. I'm like, I was interested, but I'm like, don't tell me too much.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on, as we said earlier in the show, I've kind of been on somewhat of a media blackout. Probably within the next 24 to 48 hours, I'm going complete media blackout, just because I don't want to know. Like as I had said, that they're broadcasting the premiere on StarWars.com tonight, and it was on, it was on TV. There was a special FiOS channel devoted just to that, and I was a little, I was jacked to watch it, and I watched a little bit of it, but I was still kind of on the edge of my seat. Like, I don't want anything spoiled for me. There's certain trailers that I've watched, a gazillion times. There was the first trailer that got released. I was at a Christmas party this weekend, and one of our former podcast hosts, niece, was there, and she just watched Star Wars and referred to it as a boy movie. So we didn't have I don't want to say I argued with a 14-year-old, but I kind of argued with a 14-year-old. We told her we can't be friends anymore.
Yeah,
I've known her pretty much since she was, a few months old. But Will said, "Oh, there's a new Star." She had no idea, and this blows my mind. She had no idea there was a new Star Wars movie coming out. When every other commercial has been a Subway commercial or a Fiat commercial or the Eveready battery commercial or the Energizer battery commercial and the Toys R Us commercial. It's just Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. So I was in one room having a conversation with people that I hadn't seen in probably a year. I heard him key up the trailer on his computer. I told everybody I was talking to hold that thought. I'll be right back. Ran in a room and watched the trailer.
Yeah.
The trailer I'd watched 100 times. And I still got goosebumps.
Yeah. That's I have been kind of at that point where I have to walk away from people who are like, I don't know, when they're, I'm like, this is important to me on a level. I described it to somebody the other day, like what I said before about the prequels being like, oh, your favorite band got back together. Yeah. And with this being an actual sequel now, I said, it's like if the Beatles came back to life.
Yeah,
like not just George or Ringo and Paul were playing together. No, George Harrison and John Lennon came back to life, and the Beatles are going to play again. Something that you just never thought was going to happen, and it's like, here you go, and it's good. It's not like, oh, here's a bunch of old men and here's two old men and two corpses up on stage together. It looks the way it's supposed to look.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is going to sound weird, but it was like, I love my father, and I do stuff with my dad. But I was like, hey, Dad, you want to go see Star Wars when I come home for Christmas? He's like, yeah, and because that's something my dad and I did when I was a kid. When the prequels came out, with the exception of Sith, I went and saw the prequel movies with my dad. I'm like, hey, what are you doing Friday night? Oh, nothing. All right, we're going to the movies. So I'm on that front. I'm excited to go to movies with my dad. And there's not much, there's not much that can bring people together like this. Can kind of make you forget all the bullshit that's going on elsewhere. Just kind of make you forget, it can really make you be a kid again for 2.5 hours or whatever. I think it's 2:14 is the running time or something like that. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being that 6-year-old kid again.
Yeah, me too.
6-year-old kid. I remember, when we were kids, we were young kids. It was in the early days of VHS. So it wasn't like, everybody had a copy of Star Wars in their hands that they could watch, whenever they wanted to, like we can now. I remember it kind of being an event, like, oh, it was going to be on HBO on Saturday night, and going and like laying on the floor in front of the TV for 2 hours and watching Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's for the first time in a really long time. That's kind of what this feels like. And I mean, being the nerds that we are, the nerds and the sci-fi and the comic book guys we are, we've had past 10, 15 years, we've had a great amount of good sci-fi, good comic book stuff. But this is different.
Yeah. Because this is the one, I think, maybe it's because it's the one that was ours. Maybe it's because it was the one that we were kids. Yeah. And, this one was ours. It's not from other source material. It's not, it started with that movie, and that was the thing. And it's been part of things, and the goof is, and I've seen some things goofing on it, that grown men sit and watch the trailer and start crying because it's what they've been waiting for.
I openly wept the first time I saw that trailer. I openly wept, because it was everything I had hoped for. when it was announced, and it was announced that J.J. Abrams was doing it, I started out as cautiously optimistic because at this point I've become a jaded adult, and in hindsight, the prequels weren't what we wanted them to be. But the more I've seen of this and the TV spots that I haven't watched much of. I mean, they come on TV. I kind of stopped what I'm doing and watch them. I believe that he did it justice and he got it right. We'll see in 4 days.
Yeah, we shall see,
and we shall probably see more than once.
Yeah, I'm already seeing it twice in one day. I already got the tickets.
Yeah, I'm only seeing it, unfortunately, and within the first 24 hours, I'm only seeing it once. But my weekend is open, so we'll see what happens.
My brother is going actually before me. He's going to go see it first thing in the morning.
I saw that, and I will kill him as well.
Yes. Well, what he said, he posted something on Facebook that, I'm going to tell you what happens. And I quoted from another movie. Why do you say these things to me when you know I will kill you for it?
Yes.
That's, and this is something that I've actually, I was considering. I wanted to bring up to you and pose this question, I guess, to the public. I was concerned in this day and age with the climate and with things that have been going on. That there's gonna be a ton of people at this theater, and they're having security issues, and they're having things. And I'm like, if something happens, if something's gonna be there, I'm like, if there's the chance of that, do I go ready?
What a better way to go.
Do I?
What a better way to go.
Well, I was thinking about it, but I'm like, I don't want to break the law and carry a gun with me into the theater. But I'm like, dude, do I, I'm like, but then I thought of the other end of it. I'm like, here's, if I'm there and I can save lives, and I'm like, that's kind of some NRA type of gun owner bullshit. And I don't necessarily believe in that stuff. I'm not going to break the law and carry a gun into some place that, I'm, where I live, you can't carry a gun in the public. And I'm fine with that. But I was also thinking that if I did have a gun and I'm walking up to the theater and some jackass thinks it'd be funny to tell me what happens in the movie before I see it,
you're going to jail.
I would shoot him dead.
I know you would.
And then I would take his wallet, I would find his address, and I would go and kill the people that he loves.
Wow.
It would be like the end of Unforgiven.
Wow, this took a really dark turn.
I'd be like,
2 minutes ago, I was getting all weepy about going to movies with my dad, and you're talking about murdering somebody and his family.
like the end of Unforgiven. If any of you tell me what happens in this movie, I'll kill you. I'll burn your house down. I'll burn your neighbor's house down. I'll shoot your dog.
Pretty much. So, full media blackout is commencing in probably 24 hours or so.
Yeah. Oh, there's going to be people that are going to be fucking with me, but I might even shut my phone off.
Yeah, I've considered that.
I've
absolutely considered that.
I might just throw the main breaker in my house and live like an Amish guy for a day or two.
Yeah, candles, you can.
Candles, I got a clock that runs on batteries, just and be.
Order some takeout, you're good.
Yeah. No, I'll cook out on the propane stove.
There you go.
I'll be all right.
Yeah, because you order some takeout, the delivery guy could say, "Hey, did you see the new Star Wars movie?"
Yeah. Oh, I heard. Oh, no, I killed a takeout guy, and they know that he. I'd be like, I'd have to go and do a couple of his other deliveries, so it doesn't get linked to me. It would be.
Yeah.
See,
you know what? Yeah, all right. That just scared me a little bit. That just scared me a little bit because you thought that out way too much.
I watch a lot of Discovery ID. So I watch a lot of those like show, and I'm like, well, if the takeout guy came to my house, they knew, if that was the last delivery, they would have been able to figure it out. But I'm like, all right, if I go do 3 more, things, they'd, throw them off the scent. That's the only downside to this movie. The possibility that I might have to kill people for ruining it for me.
Don't kill anybody. Just go media blackout. Just lock yourself in your house for 2 days and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that's the best bet. And I mean, it's not just for my safety, but it's for the safety of all those around me.
Yeah.
So, yay, Star Wars.
Yay, Star Wars. So, on that note, I think we will wrap up. So this has been our basically growing up with Star Wars episode. We promise that, next week we will do an episode. We won't spoil anything. But the following week, we will have a special guest with us, and we will talk The Force Awakens. So be warned, if you haven't seen it within the next week and you listen to our podcast, you will be SOL. But anyway, you know where to find us. We're on Stitcher. We're on iTunes. You can find us at the Channel Z Podcast at WordPress.com, Facebook.com/the Channel Z Podcasts. We have a new hot tag podcast coming out this week. Talk about some of the most recent WWE going-ons and whatnot. If you have anything you want us to talk about, or if you want to bitch at us for something, you can hit us up at the Channel Z Podcasts at gmail.com. So everybody out there, enjoy Star Wars. Don't ruin it for other people. And we'll talk to you next week. So I'm Chris.
I'm Mike.
And enjoy yourselves, people. Don't make Mike kill you.
Remember me how I am, filled with murderous rage.